Carlin, Innovation Consulting, Head of Clients and Sustainability. Thank you, guys.
Thank you so much. And thank you for still being here with us at the end of what's been a jam-packed day full of amazing content. Well done to everyone who's been part of that. And I must say, from having been here last year as well, it's so encouraging to see an increasing presence of the sustainability topic throughout the day, because ultimately, sustainability is about people and planet. It's not just a green agenda, it's about all of us and protecting the future of the sport that we all love. So, leading on to that, we've got some excellent people to speak to today about some best practice going on within the Premier League, some excellent storytelling and authenticity in talking about this really important issue and how to make sure we can avoid the dreaded greenwashing claims. So let's dig into it. First, I'm going to come to you, Chris. Chris is joining us from Chelsea, superstar, and recently, what was your award you just won?
I won the British Association for Sustainability in Sports Rising Star Award.
Who doesn't want a Rising Star Award, right? Props to Chris. Okay, so I would say it's definitely noticeable, and of course, winning that award is even more noticeable, the work that's going on at Chelsea. But what would you say has been kind of the most important thing about embedding sustainability? How have you gone about embedding sustainability at the club?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So my role at Chelsea was a brand new one. So I'm the ESG manager. I've been there for 18 months. So my role encompasses everything from energy, carbon, water, waste, biodiversity. I work closely with our foundation to deliver projects around social value, inclusion, accessibility and well-being. And then I also in charge of the governance. I often describe that as the most important thing that I do, but the least interesting thing to talk about, because I'm in charge of our climate risk analysis, various different compliance works with the Environment Agency, which is obviously super important to make sure we don't get fined. And in terms of what we've done recently for the club, one of the key things that I did when I joined the business was start to engage all the different areas to understand their biggest challenges that they have. I presented to every single team and made it very specific about why we need to focus on sustainability in sport, why we need to look at it in football, and why we need to look at it for Chelsea. So I was speaking about climate risk mitigation with the legal team, and I was speaking to the HR team about retaining and attracting talent to Chelsea with strong sustainability credentials. So we've released our sustainability policy, we've worked with partners, we've got a new innovative energy monitoring system at Stamford Bridge, driving energy reductions across the stadium, just trying to get a real holistic look at our sustainability in general rather than target a few things. I've kind of gone after everything.
I love that approach, and I know how much work that involves. And yeah, it's difficult sometimes to really jazz up these topics. And yeah, when you're talking about compliance, sometimes hard to get people on board, but it's so important to cover all these aspects. So Tom, coming to you at Brighton, talk me through the way that you've started introducing sustainability throughout Brighton's sort of day-to-day business as usual. What does that look like for you?
Yeah, thanks, Caroline. Great to be here in a wonderful stadium and a wonderful city. And yeah, so the sustainability story at Brighton started long before me, actually. Like Chris, I've been in post about 18 months. But the club has been doing sustainability projects and actions long before that. So going back to when our new stadium was built in 2011, it incorporated a lot of renewable technologies and other sort of energy-saving technologies within the stadium. Similarly, with the training ground, we included PV and water reuse and water capture. But they really brought me in to take a more strategic approach to sustainability, kind of recognizing that they had been doing bits and pieces already, but really kind of wanted to take a more focused, more strategic approach to sustainability. And really what that involved was kind of establishing our vision, so what we want to set out to achieve as a club, and that was very much aligned with our longer term vision for the club's overall strategy. And yeah, really setting out on a process of stakeholder engagement, so speaking to our fans, our partners, our suppliers, about how we impact them, but also how they are impacted by sustainability and what are the issues that really matter to them. And following that, we kind of identified our key areas of impact and then looked at kind of developing action plans around them with kind of clear responsibilities, timelines and resource allocated to them. And I think probably the most important for me is very much on the measuring and reporting side, going back to that phrase, you can't manage what you don't measure. So making sure that we're collecting the right data, measuring the right things, and then setting targets for improvement on those as well.
Really good work, excellent, thanks so much. And Kelsey, as a comms expert, you're looking at this from a different perspective in a way. You're not in the club making these changes, but there must be some observations you've had about a momentum, perhaps a trend developing here in football, and perhaps in the Premier League specifically, about how ESG is becoming a lot more talked about, more widely. I mean, these guys have both talked about the strategic vision of the clubs. Are you noticing anything in that respect with regards to how clubs are being more open about their strategy and including sustainability?
Yeah, there's definitely an upwards trend, I would say. There's a lot more clubs engaged with sustainability. All 20 Premier League clubs at the moment have some kind of policy, strategy or ESG commitment. And by the end of 2025, they need to have a robust environmental policy. So we'll see the trend continue. I do think there is an apprehension or a reluctance to disclose the good stuff that clubs are doing. I think my colleagues are really good examples here. There's a lot of good work that's going on in the background, but there's a reluctance to say what it is until there's either a strategy or there's enough to build like an ESG profile of the club. Whereas I think it would be more important and more impactful if the club explained exactly what they're doing with regards to ESG, just to let everybody know that they are actively engaging, because I think the perspective could be that they're not actually doing anything, when in fact that's not the case, as we can see, especially as the people that are attending this conference here today as well. I think there's a lot going on in the background, but I would like to see clubs really rant and rave and shout about all the good things that they're doing, as opposed to leaving it and waiting until a strategy or a policy comes out, because there is a lot going on in the background and it's stuff that can be built upon.
Yeah, I agree with you, and I think there's a big challenge here where we'll often see within football some amazing social responsibility stories being championed and talked really widely about, and clubs are really proud of the work, and quite rightly, that they're doing within their communities. We've heard an amazing panel earlier today about community initiatives, which is awesome, and of course that comes within the ESG spectrum. However, when it comes to environmental specifically, if you have a front of shirt sponsor or your stadium's named after a fossil fuels industry partner, there's a challenge for a club to really go out there and start shouting about improving and reducing impact on the environment. And that is sometimes the challenge that a sustainability lead within a club faces, is putting all these amazing initiatives in place and then no one wants to talk about it for fear of being shot down in flames. So there's a little bit of bravery needed here, being able to still be able to talk authentically about positive work, but also acknowledging the responsibility that you have to continuously look for improvement and reduction. And a key thing in that is collaboration, which brings us on to our next question. So the Premier League has created a working group. So it's the sustainability leads like these guys that all meet together and talk about some of the issues, some of the opportunities, and potentially some amazing initiatives they can work on collaboratively. Chris, can you tell us more about that and your involvement? And also, I know you do some other fantastic collaborations, such as People, Planet, Pint. So we'd love to hear about that too.
Ask the English person about beer. That's what we like to hear. So in terms of the Premier League, it's a really vital resource for us in terms of collaboration. It's set up by the head of sustainability for the Premier League. We get together every 3 months, alternating online and in person, to talk about various risks, challenges, opportunities that we have within football and within our organisations. And one thing that I kind of want to challenge, that's often talked about within sustainability in sport, is that we're competitive on the pitch and we are collaborative off the pitch. We are very collaborative. If we have issues, we can talk to other people. But I kind of want to challenge the idea of competitivism, because if I see Brighton and Tom have done an amazing piece of environmental sustainability work, that pushes me to do more, and it lights a fire underneath me, and I want to take the best practices that I see across the Premier League and across the breadth of sport, and I want them for Chelsea, to be able to keep us talking about it, and the more we talk about it, the better engagement that we'll have. And I often get asked on this level of engagement of, do fans really care about sustainability? We know that there's definitely a high proportion in the women's game that are environmentally conscious, but to put that in perspective, we get a Premier League engagement survey that surveys our entire membership base for Chelsea, and 71% of them believe that as a club, we should be having a positive impact on the environment. So when people ask me, do the fans care? I'm like, yes, they clearly do. And they expect us as a top flight club to be doing better and talking about what we do more, because as clubs, the benefit of you saying you've started and you're progressing in this work is so much more valuable than waiting until you're perfect and saying nothing. Because in sports, in sustainability, I truly believe that no one knows what perfect looks like yet. So if you can get started now, you're already going to be having a competitive and commercial advantage.
Absolutely. There's no such thing as a perfect environmentalist. And we'll be in big trouble if everyone waits till that moment.
Absolutely.
Tom, can you tell me how you found being part of the Premier League working group and whether there's been any benefits that you found at Brighton as a result of that?
Yeah, sure. Just to echo what Chris said, a lot of collaboration, a lot of information sharing, a lot of sharing of best practice and lessons learned. Just to give one practical example, recently a few clubs have been negotiating with Trainline around getting some discounts for their away teams to travel away. And Brentford were actually the first club to embark on that pilot. So that they successfully launched a scheme where they were issuing discounts for their season ticket holders to travel away matches. We've recently picked up on that as well, and we've just launched a similar scheme. And again, it was really useful to have that pilot with Brentford to look at and look at some of the mechanisms around how it worked, what went well, what didn't. So we could learn from that and again apply that same scheme with that learning. And again, some of the other areas that we've kind of touched on as a working group, fan travel, it comes up regularly, and it is because it's obviously a shared challenge for all of the clubs. It's a lot of these fans are making the same journeys, whichever club they support. So that's an area that as clubs we've discussed a lot, particularly around the carbon accounting side of fan travel. Who accounts for whose away fans when we're producing our carbon footprints? That's been a useful area of collaboration. And again, other areas that we're working on, particularly around energy and fan engagement as well. But again, and really useful for information sharing, particularly where I've had clubs come to me and say, "Oh, I've been contacted by so-and-so consultant who said they're working with you. Is that correct?" And it's not been correct.
Well, that happens all the time.
Happens all the time.
It wasn't us.
But just having that resource to share those queries with is really useful. And also, I think someone touched on it earlier about sometimes it's quite lonely being a sustainability manager, because you are sometimes the only person with that role within a club, and it can feel quite unmanageable at times. So to have other people who are sharing similar challenges or in similar positions, there's a feeling of kind of mutuality there. And again, for the sustainability managers, our goals are essentially the same. It's the same planet, it's the same climate. We really are kind of working towards the same goals.
I have another great example, if I can, Caroline.
Sure.
So in our sustainability working group, the facilities manager from Leicester City, they won the Premier League a few years ago now, he talked about how he wanted to build a veg garden and herb garden at the training ground, and he was applying for the money in a business case for it. And normally when I write a business case, I take my sustainability hat off and try and position it as revenue generating, cost decreasing, efficiency enhancing to try and win it, because it will add a strength to that business case, right? If you just say it's for sustainability and it's a nice thing to do, it's quite weak in my opinion. So Leicester City's facilities manager, he went to the medical team and performance team at his first team, and he said, "I know you take blood tests of the first team players on a regular basis. Are they low in any vitamins and minerals?" And they are now growing in their herb gardens specific specific herbs that the players now have to enhance their performance. So you're talking about having a facility to bring in your foundation to teach school kids about the importance of growing your own fruit and veg, and that's helping a first team player perform better, faster, stronger on a Premier League pitch. Stuff like that is just gold dust to sustainability managers like us.
Absolutely. Jump all over any opportunity like that. And as soon as you can do anything that's for the benefit of the players, you're definitely more likely to get it over the line. Kelsey, how important do you think it is for clubs to collaborate in this way, and how powerful and impactful are the stories that come on the back of those sorts of collaborations?
Yeah, I think the examples that have just been given are really a testament to how important collaboration is. Clubs are on different journeys. They're at different stages of these journeys as well. And there's no one blueprint. Every club has its own journey. And while we can mirror some, there's going to be different elements that can be picked from other areas. So if a club's just starting off and they're looking at the likes of Brighton, Chelsea, Tottenham, Man City, people that have actually done quite a bit in it at the moment, they can look at the really good things that have already happened and try to emulate those. But not everything that's done is going to refer to each club. So really understanding what other people are doing and how that relates to your club, I think that's really important. But also, I think it maximizes the impact, the positive impact, and it reduces any negative impacts by looking at the things that haven't gone so well or haven't been as impactful. So they don't have to then go and test it themselves. They don't have to have that as a part of their own strategy because they know that it might not work for their community or for what they have on their environmental side. So it's really just streamlining and maximizing the positive impacts and reducing the risks of any negative impacts that could come from it as well.
Brilliant, thanks so much. And Tom, sticking with kind of comms and engagement, particularly around fans, so it's really well established at Brighton, isn't it, for fan travel, and you've just alluded to it there. I think it's something like 80% that travel to the stadium by sustainable transport, right?
Yeah, 75%.
75, 80 is the best part of 80. So can you tell us any more about any other initiatives you've got going on where you've specifically been engaging fans on sustainability initiatives?
Yeah, I think the fan travel is a really good example, actually. When the stadium was opened, as part of the planning requirements for that, we have a travel management plan in place. And as part of that, we subsidise fan travel to our stadium for home and away fans. So within a radius of about 30 miles of Brighton, fans can show their match day tickets on buses and trains and get free transport to and from the stadium. And that's been really effective at driving those high rates of public transport usage, as you say. And again, that was part of a kind of a wider piece of work around fan travel that involved the kind of upgrading of the local station. Our stadium's about 1.5 miles out of the city, so fans have to travel either by car or by walking or by bus or by train. There's a bit of travel involved. But really, yeah, upgrading that train station, the train company puts on extra trains, for example, and obviously we do a lot to communicate that both to home and away fans to ensure that that scheme is being taken up. And I think it goes back to what Chris was saying about some of those co-benefits around sustainability. This scheme wasn't originally put in place because it reduced carbon emissions. It was very much around reducing local traffic and value for money for fans as well. So it was kind of those other benefits that really drove that program of work. But obviously there's been resulting environmental benefits from that as well. And that's reflected in other areas. We do a lot of coach travel to the women's games that play 20 miles north in Crawley Town. And again, that we put on free coaches to those games, both from an environmental point of view, but also to make sure that fans are going to those games and to encourage those fans to travel to watch the women's game. So I think, yeah, again, back to what Chris says, it's understanding those, sustainability isn't just about the environment, it's about people. And I think that's where sustainability can really have the most impact, is when it couples with, player performance or improving the fan experience or driving corporate revenue. I think it can have those multiple benefits.
Absolutely, I couldn't agree with you more. And Chris, how does the club communicate about sustainability with your fans? So, how do you also gauge fan sentiment? You've already talked about, we wanted to know whether fans care about this. Like, how do you go about finding that sort of data and that level of information?
So the comms piece was an interesting one because when I first joined the club, I think they were a little bit hesitant to start talking about sustainability. I think it's understandable because we were very, very, very new to our approach, and to be honest, we weren't practicing what I just said about putting ourselves out there because we don't know what perfect looks like, I suppose. But one of the first things that we did actually was we ran our first public campaign. We kind of just dove ourselves in at the deep end and took part in something called Green Football Weekend. So what we did is our fans took part in a competition where they scored green goals by undertaking sustainable actions that scored them points, and the team that you chose to support would rise up this leaderboard. As part of that, we also did an educational program with our foundation where they delivered 90 sessions to over 3,000 school kids in the local area. We engaged with our players in some of the workshops and brought them in and did filming, and the players talking about the importance of protecting our planet is huge. And then we also ran one of our WSL match days at our stadium. We've got 2 stadiums and a training ground, and the 4,000 capacity stadium that was mainly used for academy and WSL matches. We did a 90% plant-based menu. We reduced plastic use there. I think we reduced our carbon by about 67% and our plastic by 61%, just by real easy measures. And at that game as well, the foundation came and delivered one of the campaigns that's a Premier League funded one, where we got school kids going around and collecting up reusable beer cups that we sell there. I think we have throughout our match days, we use over 500,000 reusable beer cups every year. And we see the amount of interactions from that on social media is huge. We recently did a activation with one of our partners, MSC Cruises. I believe they're on the front of shirt sponsor for Napoli, little Italian link there. And we did something called an MSC Meadow, where we planted 100 trees that border our training ground in Surrey. Our training ground floods, actually. We go from one of the biggest training grounds to one of the smallest overnight when it rains, which is obviously, again, we go back to player performance, it's not very good. So we, with our players in men's and women's first team, we planted 100 trees that border the training ground and talked to them about the importance of talking about nature, growing up with accessibility to green spaces. And that, again, once you get a partner involved, your message absolutely skyrockets. And this is where I go back to sustainability as a commercial advantage, because if you're able to storify this with a commercial partner, there's benefits on both ends.
Absolutely. But it needs to come from a really authentic place, you know, where it's real good at the heart of it, and people can see through it if it's not. And so the storytelling around that, Kelsey, is crucial, isn't it? How can clubs avoid, and so just in case anyone's unsure of the terminology around greenwashing, what you alluded to earlier was green hushing, where clubs don't talk enough about sustainability initiatives for fear of perhaps some backlash. But actually one thing that people are quite hesitant to talk about is in case they get accused of greenwashing, which is where they could be perhaps misrepresenting some of the work they're doing and maybe stretching some of the facts. So how can clubs avoid that if they want to start or carry on talking about sustainability initiatives?
Yeah, that's quite a good question. I think for me, it's transparency. It's being very open and honest about what you're currently doing, what's going well, explaining exactly what it is, what measures are taking place, what your ambitions are, and making that public as well, because it's interesting to all stakeholders. It's not just the internal, but it's also the external. So being very clear and concise about the good things that are taking place, not overstating them, which is where the greenwashing does come in, and say how you're going to measure it. Give a methodology. If it is data-driven, give a methodology to explain how it's going to be measured so that you reduce the risk of greenwashing there. But I do also think you need to explain, I think we need to remove the stigma around explaining where you're not doing so well or where you could be doing more. There is a stigma at the moment where people aren't wanting, or teams aren't wanting to disclose where they need to improve. And I think that's a really important factor for transparency. We need to understand, from an external perspective and from a comms perspective, we need to understand where there is room for improvement so that we can see the journey, not just what's happening now, but what's going to continue to happen and what your ambitions are. And then from there, as time goes on, as the journey develops and as there's more experience within the club, as the teams grow within sustainability within clubs as well, there'll be more of an understanding of where the club is with regards to sustainability and the targets, setting KPIs and the progress towards them. And with that and all the transparency involved, I think that's where you can kind of reduce the risk of greenwashing and also green hushing as well. But I think you have some kind of understanding of Newcastle, am I correct?
Well, Newcastle are doing some amazing things, and one of the things they're talking about really actively and championing with their fans at the moment is, again, around fan travel. And they've brought out something called Magpie Movers, and what I love about that is it connects to the club's sort of at its heart. That's their nickname, is the Magpies. They have a black and white colour scheme. And the Magpie Movers is similar to what you were describing, Tom, really. So the fans pay £25 for the entire season that gets all of their fan travel for cup games and league games, from up to 3 hours before the game kickoff and all the way to the end of service of the various transport solutions in Newcastle. And so they've been able to talk about sustainability, but with something that's going to help fans, it's going to enhance the matchday experience, it's going to perhaps people can meet new people. Commercially, it's a benefit to the club because people arrive perhaps earlier than they would have by taking advantage of this scheme, and so there's some commercial benefits there, and exposure to partners and what have you. But all in all, it's a sustainability initiative that's that can be communicated in so many positive ways, and I think Newcastle's a great example of that. Thanks, Kelsey. Thanks, everybody. We're coming shortly to the end of the panel now. Hang on. What time is it? Oh, really nearly there. So let's look to the future. And so, Chris, in your opinion, we were going to talk about some of the challenges, but let's look at some challenges and maybe a challenge and an opportunity for sustainability action into the future.
I think we can break the challenges down into two areas. Those which we have control of directly, things like reducing your energy, decreasing your waste, decreasing your carbon footprint, travel, fuel usage. Those are all in your control and have a cost benefit to them. There are some challenges at the moment which I feel like as a sector are outside of our control. Things around scheduling and broadcasting dominate the football landscape in terms of finances. If I want to try and get more fans to travel sustainably, but we've got a Sunday night kickoff at 8 p.m. in Newcastle, right in the north of England, I'm going to struggle to convince those fans to travel in a manner which is going to be most effective in terms of carbon. And in fact, I think recently in a Premier League match, Liverpool's last train back from somewhere like Southampton was cancelled and fans were stranded. So as sport, we're kind of reliant on some sectors coming along this journey with us. I think opportunities, there's nothing specific that I can pull out because there are just so many out there. But in terms of how I see success in my role for Chelsea, I see the opportunities as doing things that are better for the business, reducing cost, increasing efficiencies, creating revenue generating opportunities. Those things, by the nature of my job, have to be better for people or the planet. And then finally, going back to what Kelsey's been alluding to, that we have to communicate this stuff out there. Otherwise, people assume we're doing nothing. So if you haven't done anything yet, start. It will be the best thing you ever do.
Absolutely. My former role before Enovation was at Southampton Football Club as operations and sustainability lead, and our sustainability strategy there was the halo effect, so linked to the nickname Saints, and the tagline for that was playing the right way today for a better tomorrow. And I think that's a really crucial thing to think about, and it's the same for community. You think about everything you do and how you operate as a football club now has an impact and has an effect on the future, so to bear that in mind. Tom, have you got any advice for anyone in the room today, perhaps if their club or their organisation's looking to perhaps progress on a sustainability journey?
Sure. So it sounds easy, but I think probably establishing the starting point is kind of the starting point, if you will. And for me, that was, again, kind of going back to what I said about stakeholder engagement and also the data side of things as well. You know, speaking to those stakeholders to understand what issues are important to them, both internally and externally. From that, you know, we really established that community was a big part of the club. Not just how much the community means to the club, but also how much the club means to the community as well. And from the data side, you know, understanding the data and understanding are you collecting the right data and making sense of that data as well. I think one of the things we've touched on a lot today is around the fan travel, and that's largely because, you know, the fan travel is a significant portion of any emissions attached to any event. So actually, it's quite a big area of impact. So it's understanding the starting point, because as Kelsey mentioned, all the clubs are different. They'll have different challenges. They might not own their stadium, depending on where they're based in their region or the country. The levels of awareness might be different. So really that approach is going to be different from club to club. And I think understanding that starting point is a really good place to start, I suppose.
Yeah, the most important thing is to get started. And finally, final question, Kelsey, what would you like to see within the Premier League, the EFL and the wider football industry from a sustainability perspective in the near future?
Obviously, going back to my job title, communication. I would like to see exactly what clubs are doing, to be honest. It's not to critique or anything, it's literally to understand what the state of play is. As the panelists have said, there's a lot that's going on in the background, and we know that because they've given examples of what they're doing currently. But it's going across all football clubs at the moment. There's not enough communication about what's happening. Ultimately, there's a lot of influence in sport, specifically in football, which is the most popular sport in the world. So there's a lot of influence that clubs have on their fans and other stakeholders, and they can use and utilize this influence to promote sustainability, not just with regards to engagement with the football club and with sports, but also in the daily lives of their fans to operate more sustainably themselves. So that sort of communication would be great, so that they can be leaders themselves. And ultimately, I would like to see more reports as well. And I understand that football itself is catching up with the rest of the corporate world. So there is a little bit of a time lag. I do feel as soon as there's enough information to promote, then obviously put it into a report. Again, not limiting to only doing or explaining what you're doing when you're wanting to put a report out. So drip feeding that as and when on your social media, etc. But I do want to see more reports. I appreciate not everybody has to align with CSRD. Unfortunately, you might have to. But also aligning with regulation and standards.
A lot of people in the room will.
Yeah, exactly. It's mandatory. So aligning sustainability reporting with regulation so that it can be compared, I think that's a really important thing to do as well. So a lot more communication and a lot more transparency is the message that I would give.
Thanks so much. Who doesn't love a report, right? And on that note, I'd like to thank the panelists and thank you all for staying with us at the end of a very busy day. Thanks so much for your comments and your thoughts for everybody. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you for everybody for staying so long. Grazie a tutti per essere rimasti fino